We're so excited to talk to Chris Arroyo from the State Council on Developmental Disabilities as we learn all about the return of social rec services.
Generally speaking, social recreation services are more or less programs or activities at recreational settings. And so when we're talking particularly about school-age kids, it's basically where they can learn social skills, such as healthy boundaries, how to make friends, maintain friendships, and then they may additionally have supervised outings to settings in the community like movies, baseball games, parks, and other places.
Why did these services disappear for 12 years?
So the answer is actually really simple: to save money. So back around 2009, you all may remember the recession. The developmental disability system, DDS, was tasked to save about 10% of the overall budget amount. And so consequently, some services were changed, but others were suspended. And so ultimately, non-medical therapies are back on the table. That's a big deal. That can be art therapy, dance therapy, music therapy. And then the other thing is what I call the gravy. It's educational services. If somebody gets an evaluation from the school district and it says that they are recommending 2 hours a week of speech therapy, okay, great. Then you go to the IEP at the school, and the school says, in our offer of FAPE, it's appropriate to offer a half an hour of group speech per week. And now you as a parent are standing there going, but what about the other 90 minutes? Now, because the gravy is back, what that means is you can take that 2 hour a week recommendation for a service, take the IEP, demonstrate that it's only offered for or you only got a half an hour from the school, and so you're asking for that 90 minutes from the regional center. That's the gravy. The main meal comes from the school, and the gravy, the icing, I don't know, the frosting, I don't know what you want to call it, but that comes from regional center. Now here's the thing though, and this is going to put a damper on things. You got to go to generic services first. So if you're short on speech therapy, an alternative to the regional center and the school would be health insurance. If you can't get those services, if you can't get the gravy from a generic source, then what you do is get your denial letters and present them at the regional center and say, hey, look, I tried to get the speech therapy from everybody else. Here's letter number 1, letter number 2, letter number 3, and we couldn't do it. So here I am asking you as the payer of last resort.
If I'm a parent, going into my IPP, how should I think about what could be covered, what isn't covered, so that I'm advocating effectively for the right stuff?
One of the things that I think people may want to do is ensure that their IPP goals are very tight and require this service to be implemented in order to reach the goal. Let's say like a Saturday social recreation program where people go to different places, say once a month or even weekly. What I would think would be optimal would be goals that can only be reached by participating in that program. So making friends, maintaining friendships, maybe some specific things related to those friendships, which may include conversational turn taking. I don't think you're going to get in any trouble going too specific. Unless, of course, it's so narrow that only this one little service will do the job. But if you describe the service that you want, that would be a good thing.
How do I best prepare for that IPP meeting? Do I need documentation? What should I bring to that conversation to make sure I'm advocating the best way?
In the old days, I would have said, get everything together and be able to demonstrate all the deficits in social skills that your child has. And we would approach it from a deficit-based perspective. These are things that need to be fixed with people, right? This is why we're moving to person-centered planning. And so I would mention the deficits for sure, because some people are still operating in that model, but I would also talk about why social rec skills are necessary to achieve the life that somebody wants to build. The other thing is go out there and search your resources. So our agency, we have a guide called the IPP Strategy Guide, and it talks about how to align your goals to get your services. The Disability Rights California, on their website and their publications and resources section, I hope many people are aware of the Rights Under the Lanterman Act, which is about a 350-page book about the regional centers. And there's a whole section just on IPPs.
If we're thinking about like trying to figure out who's vendor at my regional center for this, is there a list out there, tips on how to get access to that?
Every regional center has to post a list of all vendors for all of their service categories. Usually you can find it under transparency portal. So look for the transparency portal. If you can't find it, go to the search box and look it up. They're usually listed as either a giant Excel spreadsheet or just maybe a long list that you just scroll through in your browser.
So summer camps, right? Or spring break camps, does that not fall under social rec? Is that something different?
It's technically a separate service. Camping was available before 2009, and now it's available once again. If somebody is in self-determination, people can get camping services through non-vendored camping services. Right. But then if you're under the traditional system, you've got to go through a vendored camp.
Can families add this to their self-determination budget mid-year?
You would probably have to get approval unless it was less than 10% that you were shifting around. But if this is a new, like you don't have it on your self-determination program right now at all, yeah, you should ask for an IPP and adjust your budget and make the changes to obtain this service. And by the way, this is a service under self-determination that has been in existence from day one. So one of the great things about self-determination is the fact that that suspension didn't apply to self-determination.
Can you just let us know what is the self-determination program?
The self-determination program is really a way to be able to gain more freedom, control, and responsibility in choosing services and supports to help you meet your IPP goals.
Why should families consider switching from traditional regional center funding to self-determination?
So I think that the reasons that folks are really choosing self-determination is largely because they're not feeling well served by the services and supports that they're currently receiving, or possibly they're not being really served by any regional center services and supports, right? So maybe they're unable to find staff or keep consistent staff or services, or they have more unique needs that might be more difficult to meet with the more traditional regional center vendors. I think those are some of the biggest reasons that we see folks really wanting to pursue self-determination above and beyond that freedom and that control and that flexibility, and being able to choose services and supports that are in your local communities that are accessible to really anyone.
On the other hand, are there circumstances where families should not consider switching?
I think some of the reasons that folks don't switch, at least those people that do go to the orientation, is they realize that extra added layer of responsibility in choosing and arranging for services that can feel like a little too much for some people, especially if they don't feel like they have the supports to be able to do that. I think the other flip side would be if you feel like your needs are being really well served by the traditional model, you don't feel like you have any unmet needs, then, go with what's working well for you. At the end of the day, whatever model it is that's working for you and your loved one, that is the one that you should stick with.
Can we quit self-determination at any time of the year and return to the traditional regional center funding?
Yes, because it is a voluntary program. If you are in self-determination and for whatever reason it is not working for you and you need to revert to the traditional model of services, you can do that. If you choose to do that and you're back in the traditional model and you realize, oh, no, it was actually better in self-determination, then you are going to need to wait a full 12 months until you can then re-enroll into self-determination.
Should families with children under 3, for example, even consider applying?
We know that those that are in early start or have provisional eligibility would not be eligible to enroll in services unless and until they gain what we call Lanterman Act eligibility. But I do have some folks attending the orientation because they just want to be ready when they move into the 3 and up services. They begin that IPP development, and then they can also sort of start their self-determination planning.
We have a lot of questions about independent facilitators or IFs. What do IFs do, and how can they help families with this transition and beyond?
The role of an independent facilitator can be confusing. And I think that this is because they can or should be really anything that you need for them to be to help support your self-determination program journey. And that is going to vary for each person, right? So I think that's where that's coming from. The official definition of an independent facilitator is actually contained in a self-determination program service definition resource. It's 27 pages. Don't let that scare you. Okay. It is searchable. It is alphabetized, and it is definitely worth reading. So really, in short, an independent facilitator is a person, paid or unpaid potentially, who is there to support you in your journey.
How do we find independent facilitators?
There's a website, the California SDP Network. That network has filters available so that you can choose which geographic regions they serve, any special ages or skill sets that you prefer an independent facilitator to have. I also encourage folks to start attending your local volunteer advisory committee meetings. They exist in every regional center. You're going to learn the people that are involved at your regional center in self-determination, right? You're going to meet all those different titles and managers and coordinators and specialists at your regional center that are really tasked with making this program a success. It just really gives you a good lay of the land and allows you to start dialing into the SDP community in your area.
Let's talk about some of the fun stuff. Let's talk about budgets.
Let's do it.
So how are budgets determined, Christine?
The budget that you are going to be initially given, okay, from your regional center to you when you're starting this planning process is the starting point. Okay, I like to affirm that from the beginning. And that generally speaking, this is going to be a process of negotiation. Okay, so your budget is determined by the amount that the regional center has spent on your services in the last 12 months. For those of you that are brand new to the regional center or have not been with the regional center for a full 12 months, you will be taking that initial IPP with your goals and your services and the expected services that the regional center would be paying for your next year, and they will kind of calculate that out for that full year. Okay, so your base is going to be what you've used. And then from there, it really is a budget negotiation as you are maybe adding to or considering those other needs, considering expenses for services, because now you have some new goals that weren't in your last IPP.
What services or categories should families consider when discussing budget, knowing that every individual and their needs are unique, but what are some things that we may not realize can be covered under self-determination?
Self-determination program service definitions packet, okay, that 27 pager is your friend. Okay, that will list definitions of all of the different types of services that can be essentially purchased under self-determination. Examples would be exercise equipment, homemaker services, safety devices for home, office equipment, employment supports for coaching, life coaching. I mean, the list really does go on for quite literally 27 pages in that document. And I'm going to keep pointing people back there because I think it is a really underused, amazing resource. And as you are reading through that, maybe you maybe you go through that before you even do your person-centered planning, just to kind of trigger, gosh, I didn't even consider that was an unmet need.
Is the orientation through regional center?
I have the honor of being able to take the lead on the State Council on Developmental Disabilities / contracted with DDS to run statewide self-determination orientations. It is a one-time 2-hour orientation. There are some regional centers that are still doing their own orientations. So regional centers and state council are both running orientations. They may look a little different, and we are running them far more frequently through our state council orientation.
Christine, can you explain the role of an FMS? What do parents need to know?
The financial management service provider is the one that is essentially going to be receiving the money for your budget and spending, right? Paying out all of your service providers for the entire year from your spending plan. So they are the holder of your money. It doesn't come through like a personal account, right? And they are going to be paying for all of your services.
What can we do if regional center denies part of our budget?
Your rights are the same in the traditional model as they are in self-determination. Okay. So at the end of the day, if you are at a negotiation impasse and the dollars and cents in your budget from the regional center that they're willing to authorize are not going to meet your needs, or including the health and safety of your loved one, right? You just don't think that is going to work. You can appeal. So that process, of course, can take a little more time. It's ideal if you can negotiate and get that set. But at the end of the day, you do have the same rights, the right to appeal, as well as all of the others in self-determination. And so if you are a part of that and you don't think that total budget can work for you or your loved one, then of course you always have the right to appeal.